Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Your Next Best Step podcast with me, your host, Teresa Cantley. I am joined today by another very, very, very special guest, Seamus Kelleher. Did I pronounce that right? Kelleher?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay. And I am super, super excited to have him here. I met Seamus at one of my clients, and Seamus was actually a musician who was playing one night, one of the most phenomenal musicians I've ever seen. And my client has an Irish pub, and that was how I was first introduced to Seamus. And my husband and I watched you, and my husband was just like, oh my gosh, he is an amazing guitarist. So but little did I know, Seamus has another absolutely inspirational story, and just is an amazing, amazing man. And I've gotten to have several conversations with him, and I thought, with his story and him sharing his story, that he could help so many of my listeners, but just even beyond that, people that follow me on social media that will hear about this podcast, and just my whole community. So I'm going to be quiet and just shut up, and I am going to let Seamus talk. So Seamus, welcome.
Thank you, Teresa, for having me. This is such an honor for me. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's an honor for me to have you here. Like I said, I met you as a musician, but little did I know that I would call you a motivational speaker, a teacher, a guide, a mentor, a thriver, and an inspiration. So let's get into your background and a little bit about your story, because when we first started talking, because we started talking about another project that we're going to be working on. But when I started to hear your story, it's just unbelievable, the odds that you've beaten and the things that you've gotten through and gotten over, and how you are using that to help others and to really pay it forward in this world, in a time that we all really need help with this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story?
Well, I've been playing music professionally since I was 16, and I started back in Ireland in County Galway, where I'm from. And I was blessed to pick up the guitar, I think at age 14, and within a year I knew it's what I'd be doing for the rest of my life. It's never changed, not even a bit. And I did very well, very quickly. My first band was about age 16, and the band called Spoonful was a great rock and roll band. And then quickly it went up the ranks, and within a year I was opening up for bands like Thin Lizzy, the very famous Thin Lizzy from Boys Are Back in Town fame.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And became good friends with them. I did several shows with them. And then I ended up with a band called Rock and Roll Circus, which was probably one of the best bands I was ever with. It was just phenomenal talent. They were all older than me at the time. I was 20, they would have been 25 or so. But there was a kind of a backstory to all that. I was from a very abusive school situation, physically abusive. There was no sexual abuse, at least on my side of it, but physically, they beat the hell out of us. It was a Catholic church run by the Archdiocese in Ireland at the time. And so I hated violence, so that had a terrible impact on me. And it was daily that you'd get beaten. And, you just dreaded going into school every day. And that was every day. And then at the time, Ireland was on the verge of a civil war with the sectarian violence between Catholics and Protestants. And also then you had in the British Army in 1970. Mm-hmm. And it was awful. And, we just, the violence in the north of Ireland was about 150 miles away from us, but there was really fear of it spreading down to the south. And
sure.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then you had the Cold War threat. And then there was a lot of alcohol abuse. Both my parents were alcoholics. So it was a tough time. And so there was a whole other story kind of going on behind the facade of me being on stage all the time. Everybody dreamed of being a guitar player with a great rock and roll band. I was making a ton of money and playing to 1,000 people every night. We were in the newspapers. We had a record out. So, living the dream by most people's standards, because, a lot of kids that age, they didn't worry about the north of Ireland, or they didn't worry about anything else, but this was all kind of getting to me. Anyway, my mom passed when I was 20, right at the height of the fame of the Rock and Roll Circus Band. And she was my best friend. She was just my everything to me. So I think that was a trigger for falling into a deep depression. And I went back on the road, but I never got off the road. Even the night of her funeral, I played a concert. And but we were on the road, and I had a nervous breakdown. So I spent 5 weeks in hospital, a psychiatric hospital in Dublin. And thankfully, it was my dad that suggested that I do that. And he wouldn't commit me. He said, you're going to, if you want to go, you go yourself. And because there was such a stigma at that stage, back in Ireland in particularly, I'm sure everywhere, about spending time in a psychiatric hospital. I'll never forget what I said to him, Teresa. I said, Dad, if we don't get the right help from me right now, I won't be here next week.
Oh my, that's, wow.
So that's kind of the start of it. And
it's a great thing that you got help, because this world needs you so very much.
Yeah, and it's not like, woe is me. Everybody gets something. When I give my talk, people see me and they see me kind of happy, and the life I've lived. I've done several thousand shows. I played Carnegie Hall when I was 24. I played all over the world, and and to this day, I was scheduled to have 200 shows this year all over the country. Before COVID interrupted the plan. So, and I've dealt with depression and anxiety all my life. And for the most part, I've been able to overcome it. There's times it just raises its ugly head. Like the last time that was really bad was about 7 years ago, and I spent time in Horsham Clinic in PA. I spent a week there inpatient, and then 4 weeks outpatient. But most of the time, I can see the warning signs, and I take steps to avoid getting into major problems, Mm-hmm. And, but I think the big thing, and my big message, and we'll probably talk more about this, is just be open to getting help, because there is help available to people. Of the 16 million people that suffer depression in America each year, it's probably a lot more. They're the people that diagnose. You can rest assured it's much closer to 25 million.
Yes, no, I would definitely agree with you.
Yeah, but I think the staggering statistic is less than half get professional help. Mm-hmm. Even though they're being diagnosed.
Right, and there definitely is. I mean, you mentioned this. I mean, for years there was a stigma surrounding, if you do have depression, you do have anxiety, and you do go, you go to get help. A lot of people wouldn't get help because there was, such a stigma surrounding it. But even if you did go to get help, it was always like you had this label on you, that there was something wrong with you. And I think that's why, and I myself struggle with anxiety, and you're right, it rears its ugly head. And in many people that I've talked to that have said to me that they put off getting help, and they put off, trying to figure out how to deal with it, and how to really, how to get better with it, or get better from it. They put off getting help because they were afraid, and yeah. You just can't be afraid, because so often, my brother-in-law committed suicide, and so often, like I said, people don't want to get that help, and they suffer in silence. And,
yeah. That's it. And there was an article written about me a few years ago, and it was called "Suffering in Silence," and that's definitely it. And the sad thing about this is, of the people suffering from depression, 90% of them can get a really good result from a therapy of, so sometimes it could be just going to a therapist, maybe just talking to somebody, maybe that's all they need, or else going to a psychiatrist. And psychiatrists can prescribe meds and also look at kind of what's going on chemically in the brain, what's triggering some of the stuff that's going on. And since we're talking about that, I should always say the medication should only be done in consultation with a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. And but so some form of therapy, maybe medication if needed, under the guise of a guide of a psychiatrist. And then if you're really bad, like me 7 years ago, or, when I was 20, if you need hospitalization, and sometimes that's what you need. If you're really, really bad off, if you just can't put the pieces together, and then you might become a danger to yourself, then it's absolutely time to go to it. And there, the stigma, unfortunately, it's there. But I think once people realize that there is help available, and that you don't have to live like that, that's an easy choice for me. I'll take the stigma. I don't care if people say, "Oh, that's Kelleher," Seamus Kelleher. He spent some time in Horsham. I saw him there 7 years ago, and but he's looking up at this. The Seamus Kelleher that he's looking at is at the top of his game, playing guitar to hundreds of people every night,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll take the stigma as long as I can get the Seamus Kelleher that's, playing to those people every night, doing what I love to do, and being here for my kids and my wife. Mm-hmm. And wasn't more important, but just as important, I have an opportunity, because I have a stage every night, to show people that you can overcome this. And I talk very publicly about it, Teresa, because one of my goals is, with all this motivational speaking and pretty much everything I do right now, even in my stage performances, is to do exactly what you talk about, get rid of the stigma. And when people see me, I introduced the song and so I wrote the song about my struggles with depression. You see people nudging themselves, and almost like shuffling and feeling uncomfortable. But if I told you the amount of times that I had people come up to me on a break and said, "Thank you for doing that." For the first time, I felt a weight off my shoulders by just somebody else. And, I didn't even try to help them at that stage. I'm just singing my song. Mm-hmm. And but what I did was allow them to be open up to me. And, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And it's like, they always say that people, one of the human desires is people want to know that you hear them. They want to know that what they're saying means something. So without even having that conversation, and that's one of the beauties about music is, it's this language. Music it transcends cultures and languages, and, it enables you to speak to them without having that physical conversation. Yeah. And allowing them to, it's like what you were saying in the song had them think, wow, he understands me. He gets me. And that's the beginning to having that healing.
That's the beginning of the healing, and as soon as, when I know that I've really had an impact, is when somebody comes up and says, "Jean, can I talk to you for a minute?" And that's a big step. And I often tell them, because they say, it's hard. And I say, "Yeah, but do you realize you're after taking a big step?" I said, "I know how hard it is to walk up to a stranger, or even somebody that, if they do know me." Let me give you just one example how this all works. And about 2 years ago, I was playing down in, let's just say, Maryland, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a guy there, John, not his name, but he was a tremendous musician, very well known, better known than me. And he come up to me at the end of the show, and I was sure he was going to ask me about guitars, because that's what everybody asked me about. I'm considered a decent guitar player. That's what everybody asked me.
Decent? No, you're amazing.
But anyway, so I was sure waiting for, is it a Fender Stratocaster, is it a Telecaster, all these names that musicians use for guitars. And he said, Seamus, he said, "I've been having a hard time lately." He said, "And you're very public about your struggles." So I said, and I was just wrapping up the equipment, and I had a 2-hour journey back home. But I said to myself, "Why don't we just go over there and talk?" And 2 hours later, we finished. And the poor guy had been going through, in the depths of depression, And at the end of the conversation, I said, "John," I said, "if half of what you're telling me is true," I said, "forget going to a doctor or a therapist at this stage. You need to go to see a psychiatrist, because I'm really worried about you, the state you're in right now." So there's no kind of in between. You're at a stage. And I said, "I am not a doctor. I'm not trained. I have no training." But I said, "I am trained in suicide prevention. and crisis intervention. And I said, I recognize signs with you right now, not just from my training, but from my own personal experience that you need help. So I said, we, and I always called it the Queen's we. I said, we need to get you help. So by just that we, using the word we, it kind of shares the burden. Now I'm in this fight with him. I'm the only person he had ever talked to about this, not his bandmates, not his girlfriend at the time, and not his children. You know, I was the first person. But I said, John, you're after taking a huge step. So fast forward several months, it was hard to get him to see somebody. It was like, he's such a type A personality. In addition to his music profile, he also was a very successful businessman. But I remember one day, it was one of the best texts I had that week. He said, I'm on my way to the psychiatrist. So I just said, right. So I didn't, the worst thing you do is kind of pester somebody. I knew he was gone, so I had to kind of give him the time. So several days later, he said, the psychiatrist said, what I'm going through is kind of normal. He said, there's nothing crazy wrong with me. I'm suffering from depression and a little bit ADHD. And he said, he put me on a minor dose of medication. He said, but already I feel better. I said, of course you do. I said, you've taken the first step. And I said, buddy, it's only going to get better and better. And then I saw him, I was down in this place every 2 months. So let's just fast forward about 4 months. And I saw him, man, he looked so different,
Really?
The life was back in his face. And I just started smiling when I saw him. He said, you have no idea, buddy, what you did for me. And he said, life has changed. I said, I didn't do anything, to be honest. I said, I was like a traffic cop. I'm not trained to help you. I said, all I did was point you in the direction of what you needed. I said, you made the difference yourself. Always remember this. I said, because you may not be free of this forever, but you took that first step. You came to see me and talk to me. Always remember that moment, because that's what's going to save you for the rest of your life. I said, because it won't be a Seamus Kelleher, it'll be somebody else. And I said, but you've already it was a kind of heroic step for you. I know how proud you are. You're a great musician. Everybody knows you. And it was hard for you to do that. But you know what the wonderful thing is now? He comes in to see me on a regular basis. That's 2 years ago. The guy is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? He comes in to see me and with his friends, and he'll often be talking with his friends. And he'll say, Seamus, he said, I'll never forget what you did for me. Now, the important thing there is, it's not the accolades to Seamus. The important thing is he's now talking about it very openly. And that's to me, that's a great accomplishment. If I accomplish something with him, because like I said, he made the difference himself by asking me. But the bigger thing that I'm trying to do with my career right now, as long as God gives me hopefully many years to do it, is to kind of take it out of the shadows and have that conversation. And because like it used to be that if you ever wanted to kind of get a little bit of quiet at the dinner table, so anybody feeling depressed lately or stressed, that'll take the air, suck the air, oxygen out of the room in 2 seconds. Not so much nowadays.
Yeah.
During COVID, when everybody is like, it's like, everybody's feeling some kind of stress between the election and COVID and some of what's been going on in this country. And this is not a political statement. It's just the reality that people are feeling stress, people that I never thought would ever feel stress. And the good thing is people are starting to talk a little bit more openly about it. You see it on TV all the time.
No, it's true. And I was this is a good kind of segue into, a lot of small business owners, a lot of small businesses have been dealing with, the impacts of COVID. Everybody has, but, a lot of small business owners, I know that's, who I work with, small business owners, local business owners. I've seen people shut their doors. I've seen people just, lose. You and I had a conversation. You had 200 shows booked in the beginning of the year for the year, and that all went away. And I know that a lot of businesses right now, are really, waiting to see what happens with the election, with cases going up. And we live in Pennsylvania, it's a lot of stress. And you're right. They've talked about it on the news, the The rate of depression and anxiety in the United States it's just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And people are starting to talk about it more because you can't really hide it. You can't run from it. You can't, because there's so many things coming at you right now. And between, like I said, between COVID, between the social injustice we've experienced in this country, with George Floyd and other things that have happened, and just the protests and the rioting, and it's a lot of heaviness, and a lot of people think, oh, I can deal with this, and right now it's just a lot coming at you. And then at the same time, hearing you need to pivot your business, you need to pivot. So let's talk a little bit about kind of, with everything that's been happening and dealing with, the events of 2020. As I was telling everybody, 2020 is the year of, clarity, the year of 2020 vision. And it didn't look like what anybody thought it was going to look like. So let's talk a little bit about, what you did to pivot, and what that looked like and how that relates to the conversation that we're having, and kind of what you decided to do.
Yeah. And I kind of incorporate a few of the things that I did for my own mental wellness during this time. Mm-hmm. So we go back to March 14th, right? I had a show somewhere here in Pennsylvania. It might have been at McCarthy's Red Stag Whiskey Pub. It was an amazing night. And then I had St. Patrick's month is for musicians. It's like you make a portion of your salary, a significant portion of your salary. The next day, it all went up in smoke, right? Everything was shut down, not just like a little bit. It was shut down. And even then, they made it clear it was going to be months before. Mm-hmm. And it opened up. Turned out to be a lot longer. So I was devastated. And I knew that, I had, I'm disposed to depression. I'm disposed to anxiety and addiction, right? I've been sober 6 years. And so the last thing I needed was to go back drinking again.
Yeah.
But these were all kind of triggers, kind of the loss of hope, the sadness I was feeling. But I was able to kind of draw on some of the things that I tell people to do. And during times like this, I say, it's very important to do a mental wellness check on yourself. Ask yourself, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling hopeless? Is there self-loathing going on? Are you staying in bed all day long? Are you avoiding doing things that you used to do, like hanging out with people, eating, and all sports, whatever it might be, music, guitar playing? In my case, if you don't hear playing guitar, don't hear me playing guitar once a day, please call a doctor. Anyway, but they're the warning signs, right? So how you can kind of get ahead of that a little bit. And it's not a Pollyanna, do these 5 things, you're fine. But doing these 5 things will help under any circumstance, especially when things are changing by the moment. Put some routine in your day. Pick a time to get up every day. I do not allow myself to sleep past 9:30. Now, I'm I stay up late at night, so 9:30 is a reasonable time for me. But, it would be easy to try and stay in bed until 11 o'clock just so that I wouldn't have to deal with this, especially back in March, not have to deal with the blackness of the whole situation. Because I wasn't just worried about myself, I was worried about my children and my wife, and losing everything, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking at the house and saying, how long can we keep this? And anyway, putting routine in your day, controlling the things you can control, like exercising a little bit, right? Picking a time to share your meals together every day. Once again, the routine. Picking, like I said, the exercise thing. Picking some things that you can accomplish, goals that you can accomplish. For me, I'm trying to finish a book that I had started 12 years ago.
Ooh.
So I said I have to do 10 pages every day. So I could accomplish that. I didn't do it every day. Most days I did. And so I don't need to go on and on. You get the idea. So there are some kind of fundamental things people can do. Now, in terms of pivoting, which is your original question, is it's really important to realize that we're in a period of change that's not going to stop changing for quite a while. It's going to evolve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Now, I'm not saying it's not hard. If you're a pub owner and that's your only kind of business, it's hard if your pub is shut down. There's not much you can do about it. But you can maybe start preparing for, well, we know they're going to start doing takeout. How can we do that? And how can we be different than the other guy down the street? I'm an Irish pub. Maybe I can do whiskey making classes. Maybe I can do cocktail, Irish foods or whatever. I'm just picking that because that's the word I know, right?
Yeah.
But the same would apply to an Italian restaurant. There's one up the street here that's just done a fabulous job here. From like 2 weeks after COVID, he was doing takeaway in a way that I'd never seen it done before. It was so cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the pivot. And then it's probably good to give it myself as an example. So I lost everything, right? But I did get a call about the fourth week in March from Texas A&M College of Medicine. Now, I had spoken there a few years ago as part of my motivational speaking. And they asked me to do a motivational talk for their staff and faculty, right? They said the staff and faculty are really struggling. They just need a pick-me-up. Said, can you do some of your messaging, but we want to hear some of your music as well? I said, absolutely. I said, when do you want me to do it? They said, tomorrow. So I said, holy crap, how can I do this? Something like this can take, especially if it's kind of geared towards a special thing, can take weeks, months to do, put together. I said, sure, I'll do it. That's part of the pivot, right? I made the decision I'm going to do it. Now,
Go with your gut.
Now I was like, how? I stayed up late that night and I put a script together. And now I had a lot of it already. It was just, but I had to kind of make it kind of address the moment. But I gave it everything I got. I worked really, really hard. And I rehearsed. I was up in my bedroom walking around, pacing, especially rehearsing my introduction. As you know, Teresa, that's the introduction is always, that kind of sets the tone for everything. Right? And because if you kind of go, ba, 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 as I do sometimes. So I made sure my introduction was good. And anyway, it went very well. And I got a lovely call later on that day saying, you have no idea, that really helped a lot of people today. They said, would you consider teaching a class to our med students and on mental wellness? Because that was kind of the topic for the Zoom call. And I said, sure. I said, what are you looking? He said, it will be a 2-week class, an hour each day, over a 2-week period. And they said it'd be 10 to 20 students each time. And I said, sure. I said, when do you want me to start that? And they said, could you do it tomorrow? At this stage, my head is really spinning. But I used to be an adjunct professor at New York University in media studies and also at Fordham University. Mm-hmm. I think I'm an academic at heart. And so I wasn't too daunted by it, but it was just, I wanted it to be really good. And so I said, I'll give you the first week's syllabus, the second one you'll get tomorrow. And so I did. And I've been doing that now ever since. And so I think I've done 8 classes so far, maybe more.
Oh, wow.
And then after about 2 months, they made me part of the adjunct faculty. So what am I? I'm an adjunct assistant professor at Texas A&M College of Medicine. Now, wow. If you told me March 1st, what would you like your career to be for the rest of your life? I would say, well, first of all, I want to continue doing my music, but I really miss my teaching. And if you would ask me, what were the chances I'd ever get back to teaching? I'd say, yeah, that ship has sailed. Mm-hmm. So here I am, not just getting back to teaching, but getting back to teaching at one of the best universities in the country, probably in the world, and a renowned medical school. And they're associated with a lot of other medical schools, and that's opening up opportunities. So anyway, that's how it's good. So that's nice to have on my resume now, and it's opening up other doors. But to make that happen, I had to learn all this technology, all the Zoom stuff. If you look here, I'm afraid to face my computer around, but it's like a staging area for NASA. There's lights everywhere. I don't get to look this good
No,
naturally.
I get it. I know. I know the lighting. I always like have good light, like try and have good lighting because it gets rid of the wrinkles.
Yeah, and I'm trying to put the camera up higher enough so you're not seeing all this.
I know.
But anyway, but the idea is I had to do that. I went out, first thing I went on, started Googling microphones and video and cameras and all that. So every single day I was doing that in addition to kind of improving my course, right? So that was my pivot, right? And there's things that terrified me, like the first time, I did a corporate thing for a big company, and I was terrified. So I had to kind of embrace the fear, There was a great book, something like Face the Fear, Do It Anywhere. I forget that, something like that. And it's like, but that's what I was doing. I was facing my things, my fears, and not just my fears. Probably it might be the wrong word, but things, the unknown, the uncertainty. And I'm not the best techie guy in the world. I know enough to be dangerous, but I embraced it. And I reached out to, there was a young kid in Ireland. I reached out to Shane Hennessy, great guitar player. He's only 25, but I feel like you're just soulmates, And every 2 weeks I have an hour-long session with Shane where he teaches me technology. Later on this week we're doing sound recording, but he's helped master the lighting, master the video, and now I'm sharing that with others that kind of trying to make their Zooms and their calls better.
You said something that was interesting about this time right now. It's full of change and there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people are, and I think the universe was probably pointing you in a direction that it wanted you to go, which was the teaching and sharing your story. And I think a lot of people, particularly this year, I think people had gotten comfortable. They had gotten to a certain level in their life, or businesses had gotten to a certain level in their business. And in certain ways, they've gotten comfortable. And all of this uncertainty and all of this change that has happened is actually pointing out where we've all kind of hindered our own growth. And it's whether or not, I believe, that you choose to see that so that you can lean into that fear, not run from it.
Yeah.
So that you can continue to move forward. And, that is, I think in a lot of ways with your story, you faced a lot of fears.
Yeah, it did. And Teresa, one of the things, I don't want to I use the word Pollyanna a lot because sometimes, because I do get enthusiastic, I tend to be a bit on the manic side, I tend to be up and down. But it's not that every day was perfect. There was one day where, and I remember being honest with my students, I said, I'm very low today, and it's kind of that idea is it's okay to be okay. And what I tell people, and this gets back to where I think it's good advice, it's okay to be not okay one day, 2 days, 3 or 4 days in a row, you need to see somebody. It's time to get help. And because we are dealing with a lot of change and it's stretching us on every level. And we question all the things that we thought were permanent are not so much anymore. But that doesn't, kind of what you're alluding to, the fact it can provide opportunity for growth. And even though, like, you might be losing your house, you might be losing, a lot of things, your job or whatever. And it doesn't seem that way. And it's not like you're just painting it with this bright brush. Oh, this is great. I just lost my job. I'll do something else. It's not that easy. You still have to pay your bills, right? But, if you kind of say, I am going to get through this, I'm going to get through it. And let me just bring up something. You and I discussed it a few minutes ago. And I really like the idea. So I think we should share it with your wonderful audience. And it's kind of the idea of mindfulness, right? Mm-hmm. And I never really understood mindfulness. Now, and this is even going back as recently as March. When I was in the hospital, they were talking about it all the time. So I knew it was important to discuss. So I used to bring it in as part of my teaching. But to be honest, I didn't fully understand it. until my neighbor, Kira Crayman, she's a wellness coach. She she copied me on some email, and she was talking about mindfulness. And it was so lucid and so well explained. And I said, Kira, I need you. So, will you talk to my students? I said, I just talked about mindfulness yesterday. I said, I said, I have the right idea, but I wasn't able to put it in any of the context that you can. And she did, and it was wonderful. So let me just give you the core of what she said with mindfulness. Mindfulness is a way of, when stuff happens, when stuff comes at us, mindfulness is just a way of kind of saying, okay, this is happening, and you allow yourself to kind of react and to be maybe, let's say, for instance, COVID, that's whatever, Saturday or Sunday when the bottom fell out of my world. I was really, really angry. I had a tour booked this summer, 50 people going to Ireland. It was like going to be 25% of my salary for the year.
Wow.
Gone, poof, gone. I had to cancel it back in the next day. On and on and on. So my reaction was, I'm really mad, There'll be a lot more profanity involved if I really let myself go, but this is a family program, so we won't do that. and I was angry.
Put your earbuds in.
Yeah, I was angry that I couldn't play music. I was angry that this was happening to my children, that they weren't able, I had to go down and get both of them college-age kids out of college and bring them home. And I was just so afraid for them, right? I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at everybody. And then, but that was okay. That was the anger. And that was my reaction. And this is what Kira talks. It's okay to have that reaction when something happens. So my reaction was mad, angry at myself in some ways that I hadn't chosen another profession. And go through all those emotions. But then she said, what's really important is how you respond. In other words, the reaction is kind of the visceral thing you have. It's like when somebody cuts you off on the highway, and they cut you off. And the first thing you want to do is kind of maybe flip them the bird or something like that, because that's your kind of reaction. But then the response should be, that person is yelling at me. They don't even know me. In what world are they living in? What kind of stress are they in? And then you will respond. You kind of reframe what just happened. And rather than react by giving them the bird or something, or worse, chasing them like I used to when I was a kid, I'd respond by just kind of going on and just feeling an empathy and hoping that person is okay. And that's the same with then the reaction to losing my work was, really that anger. But then the response was, okay, so how can I start, even before the opportunity came with Texas A&M, I started the book and I started writing songs again. I did concerts from my porch. So I found that was the immediate thing. That was a good response. And I think that's very important. And, I'll share that link with you. And maybe if you want to share it with your people watching the podcast, you can at some point. And it's Kira just does a wonderful job. So the mindfulness is like just giving yourself some space to process this, not being angry. Don't be judging yourself about what's going on. It's natural to feel the way you're feeling. But and the way you're reacting, but the way you're responding is kind of different, and it comes from an old Buddhist idea to talk about the first arrow and the second arrow. And the idea is, the first arrow comes at you, you have no control over that. It's just coming at you, boom, hits you, and you're kind of, man. But then the second arrow, is you have an opportunity to respond differently to that,
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful kind of idea. And I love it. And the reason I put so much stress in it is it's worked for me. There's so many times I just want to, break out and get mad or something like that. and I'll just reframe it and say, um, how can I respond to this? How can I turn this around into some kind of reframe it? In a different paradigm is a nice word for it. But kind of another word is kind of reframe it. Think of it as a picture frame. This is what happened. Now, how can I reframe this? Because the reality is, the stress, and this Kira talks about this. The stress that we're feeling, it's not the situation. It's just how we're reacting to the situation, or responding to the situation. In some cases, is what's causing the stress.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have a lot. We can really control that much more than we give ourselves credit for.
It's kind of like I always tell the people that I work with that if you can't take your you can't help your circumstances. We can't help that COVID happened. We can't help that all that, we can feel a certain way about it. But then the next decision that you make, if you continue to base it on circumstantial thinking, you're never going to get yourself out of being stuck. So you have to base it on, okay, what is going to move us closer to where we want to go, and choose how you respond based on that. Because a lot of times, just in business, people think they base where they want to go and what they want to do on their current circumstance, which is like reacting to what's happening right now. And you can be mad about it. You can be upset about it. You can be frustrated with it. But then your next step is the respond. Like, how are you going to respond to it? And, you want to respond based on, where you want to go, or the difference that you can make, or the opportunity, like how you can move yourself forward. So it's the same kind of, it's bringing that mindfulness in to how you're handling situations, in your business.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. And the other thing, it's okay to mourn the loss of something.
Absolutely.
If your restaurant closed, if your business closed, or if it's changed, if you're not going into the office, and let's say you're one of these people that love going into the office, there are a few people that do like.
Yeah, not me.
But there are people that need that social interaction. So it's okay to mourn the loss of that, because the reality is for some of these people that they're not going to see those people at such an intimate level moving forward. So it's okay to kind of mourn the loss of something. It's very important in order to move forward, I think, to process that loss of whatever it is. And but as you're doing that, it's also important to start reframing the circumstance. Okay, I can't go into the office anymore. How can I do this? And then, so I know I'm going to be working from home, not just during COVID, but moving forward. How can I extend my social circle so that I am seeing people? Maybe it's a bridge, or maybe it's card games, or maybe it's, music, whatever it's going to be. So you have to reframe things, because it's not just, it won't happen on its own. And so kind of mourn the loss, be mad, be angry. That's kind of the reaction type of thing. And, but the response really should be kind of building, and okay, I have to make the best. And, you often hear people say, I'll make the best of a bad situation. Well, that, I think that has a bit of a negative connotation. It doesn't have to be a bad situation, but, make the best of the situation that we're living in, because we don't really control it. But what we can control is what lays ahead. But it does take a bit of work. And, there's a lot of anxiety associated with change, and it's okay to do that. And that's why it's really important. Like, these kind of podcasts are wonderful. Mm-hmm. And, I have different groups that I deal with. I'm just starting a new organization called the Suicide Prevention Alliance, where, we're helping people with dealing with suicide. And it's, there's 8 people on the board. And yesterday we had our first in-person meeting, and it was lovely. I needed that. we were out in Harrisburg, and just to be among people, we're all socially distanced, but, we're all on the same page, and we're just kind of propping each other up. So I think, don't try and do it on your own. Reach out to people, pick up the phone, and, and not just on Facebook and social media. Social media is fine. It has the place, but there's nothing like picking up the phone. You can go grab a cup of coffee with somebody, take a walk, and, but it's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been an amazing, amazing discussion. But like I said, I have two more questions for you
Okay.
that we didn't talk about before
All right.
that I ask all of my guests that join me on the podcast. But I just want to say thank you so very much. You have shared so many amazing nuggets to help people to get through, these times and even any time of crisis. One of the things that you brought up is, whatever you're feeling, feel it, and don't, a lot of people try and push that down. But I think, and Brene Brown talks about this in her books, like being courageous means being vulnerable and being able to say, and recognize those feelings and being able to admit it, and say, I'm not feeling so good today, or I'm feeling great today, but when it goes past a certain amount of time, then it's important to get help. So,
She is amazing, by the way.
Brene Brown, I love
Yeah,
her. Oh my gosh,
absolutely.
love her. I've read every single one of her books. She's awesome. All right. So question number 1, what was one of the most pivotal moments in your life that really helped you to move forward and to figure out what it was that you wanted to do, or what your purpose is here?
Yeah, I think that's kind of an easy one.
Kind of.
Yeah, because it's coming up to the 6th anniversary of my sobriety, and it was Halloween. We had a party here at the house in Doylestown. My kids were too old for trick or treating, so we had a party where we had all these fun games for them at the back. We have a big backyard, and I was drinking at the time, so I had a few whiskeys during the daytime before my wife got home from work, knowing that the few glasses of wine we'd have in the evening wouldn't be enough to keep me going. And I also managed to sneak next door and have a drink with my friends. Or two. And so I wasn't drunk or anything like that, but I definitely wasn't 100% sober. And Mary Pat, my wife, said at about 10 o'clock before the parents came to pick up the kids, she said, maybe you should go up to bed. It's probably best that the parents of the kids don't see you with a few drinks. Just, yeah. It wasn't in any way nasty. Because I would have been way more drunk than that at other times. And so I said, sure. Went up to bed, fell asleep, woke up the next morning. And I said to myself, what am I doing? I said, as a kid, I worried about coming home from school. I was going to get my sober mom or, my not so sober mom. Would I have to find her next door? Mm-hmm. Getting a drink with the neighbor. Getting in my dad's car knowing that he had too much to drink. Mm-hmm. And now I was doing the same thing. I was driving with my kids in the car. If somebody said, what would the one thing you'd change in your life? I'd say it was that, driving when I was drunk.
Yeah.
And then, to the best of my knowledge, I never, got pulled over or hurt anybody, but I could have.
Mm-hmm. Is that when, so that was when you got sober, but that's when you also got some more help, right?
Yeah, all of the above. So that morning I picked up the phone to a friend of mine who'd been sober for 12 years and said, Mike, I said, I'm hurting, man. I said, I'm drinking. The drink is ruining my life. It's killing me slowly. And he said, how about I come over 2 hours later? And, that really was the beginning of my journey. And, we met every few weeks for a year. And then, gradually as I got stronger, then I started thinking about, okay, maybe there's a way to translate this into something else. And I decided not to go back to the corporate world because that had been causing me an awful lot of stress. And I decided that maybe I'd go back to the music full time and dedicate the rest of my life to trying to help people with, going through the similar struggles. but that was that was it really. If that was a pivotal moment, because I remember it so clearly. I'm just thinking now. I know exactly what I was doing. It was by my nightstand. I was just sitting there, and I said, I said, I'm sentencing my kids to the same thing that I went through. I said, why would I ever want to go through that again?
Yeah. They say, Oprah always says that life whispers to us constantly. It's whether or not we want to listen. And some
Yeah,
people don't listen. And then the whispers get louder until they smack you
yeah,
upside the head. But
yeah,
that's, wow, that's a pivotal moment.
yeah. It was.
And it brought you to this point where, now you play, like I said, you're an amazing musician, and you're able to help others, through sharing your own story.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. What are you most grateful for?
All the second chances I've been given. 12 years ago, I fell down 2 flights of stairs in Valley Forge after a show. I'd been drinking way too much.
Wow.
I fractured my skull, bleeding on the brain, and I was medevaced to the University of Pennsylvania Trauma Center, and I was in ICU for 3 days. They didn't know if I was going to make it, but this thick Irish skull did.
Wow.
Go back to when my dad suggested I go to St. Patrick's Psychiatric Hospital. So the theme is I'm very thankful for the help I got when I needed it. Mm-hmm. I'm very grateful for that. Obviously, my wife, my kids, that's the greatest gift of all. But I think it's that, because even before then, I'm grateful for the, just being able to get the help and kind of being that for whatever reason, I was open to getting the help, and that's why I try to convince people is just open up your heart and mind. We all need something. And so I'm very grateful that I got the help. I got it, be wrong to say that I just got it 6 years ago. I got it many times. And so, there's a reason why, statistically, I should have died many times over, So there must be some reason I'm still here. And so I'm grateful for the help I got during those dark periods, and for all the joy that I have right now. As soon as I finish this, I'll probably go downstairs and play guitar for an hour, just doing what I love.
Awesome.
And, my son is home today. The rest of them are all out at school or working. Two of us will sit down and chat, and, just all those little things that maybe I took for granted years ago. I'm grateful for all that. So, I could go on and on about what I'm grateful for, but I'm basically grateful for all the second chances I've gotten. And my goal is to be true to, I'm not the most religious person in the world, but be true to the maker and maybe help some other people. If it's only one person, that's okay, but I hope it's a lot more people. Kind of, my whole presentation is called Shine the Light, and that's it. And it's not this kind of fancy thing. All it is just kind of shining the light in the darkness for people that can't see the light, and shine the light on people who are struggling from depression, anxiety, and other forms of mental illness and addiction.
Yeah.
Shine the light forward so that we can just move forward and, enjoy our time that we're given on this earth. That's it.
Well, you are quite a light in the lives of many, many people. And you definitely have some guardian angels watching over you. So, but thank you again for sharing your story and for joining me on this podcast. You, like I said, I just think you're amazing. And now that I've gotten to know you more, I'm just so honored to have you join me here. But I'm also just so grateful to have connected with you.
Thank you. And if anybody, needs to, you can, when you send out the podcast, whenever you're doing, if anybody needs to reach me, they can. You can give out my email. I'm easy enough to find. Seamus Kelleher will pop up anywhere. All my contact information is there. If anybody needs to give me a call or text me or whatever you want to do, I'll always be able to pick up the phone. And sometimes it's just having a quick conversation and maybe refer to somebody or something like that. But like what I tell people, start the conversation. Don't be shy about starting a conversation. I said, because it can be life changing. Changed my life. I'm still here.
Absolutely. And we're so, like, the world is so blessed because you're here. That was going to be my next thing, is to tell people how they could find you. So definitely we can share that in the show notes for anybody who is listening to this podcast on iTunes or Google Play, or even going to my website. You will be able to download the transcript of this, and we will also have the links that Seamus referred to.
You can get email on my website is always the best way, and and I'm always willing. The one thing I can absolutely promise, as long as I have my health, I'll be willing to take a call from somebody. And like I said, if it's just have a conversation and point them in the direction. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor, but I can help. I can point you in the direction of somebody that can help you. Yeah,
as I said, you have a PhD in life, so that's all you need. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Seamus, for joining us, and I really, really appreciate it.
Same here. You made my day. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome.